Carl Sagan is often celebrated as the gentle poet of the cosmos, a man whose voice could make the cold, silent void between the stars feel warm and friendly, and whose imagination turned the entire universe into a storybook full of glittering pages waiting to be read. He was born in 1934 in Brooklyn, New York, a noisy neighborhood where the subway rumbled like a distant thunder and neon signs blinked like tiny man-made constellations. Yet even their young Carl kept looking up as if the rooftops were doors to faraway worlds. As a boy, he wandered through libraries the way explorers wander through jungles, fingers trailing along spines of old books like a treasure hunter checking maps, convinced that buried inside those pages were clues about comets, atoms, and maybe even other civilizations. He collected questions the way other children collect trading cards, stacking them in his head until they formed a tower of wonder that kept growing taller and taller. Carl's curiosity sparkled like a pocketful of tiny stars. He asked about everything from why stars twinkle to whether whales might sing the same songs for millions of years, and adults sometimes blinked at him if he had just asked how to hug a whole galaxy. He loved the idea that humans were made of the same stuff as the stars, that the iron in our blood and the calcium in our bones were forged in ancient stellar furnaces, and he liked to picture every person as a walking, talking piece of star history carrying a tiny light inside. When he was small, city lights often hid the night sky, but that never stopped him. He imagined the invisible stars beyond the glow like secret lanterns waiting to be discovered, and he practiced stretching his mind to reach them. At school, he devoured science books as if they were candy, staying up late to read about atoms, planets, and the strange, beautiful laws that seemed to stitch the universe together like a cosmic quilt. He studied hard, not because he wanted to impress anyone, but because every new fact felt like a new window opening onto a bigger, more wonderful world. Carl went to college, then to graduate school, and he kept chasing questions with the gentle urgency of someone who believed the universe had been whispering to him all along. He loved teaching because telling stories about the cosmos felt to him like passing on secret keys to a magical kingdom, and he had a way of turning the most complicated ideas into warm, memorable tales that made listeners feel smart and hopeful. He wasn't just a scientist who stayed in labs. He went to observatories. He worked with spacecraft missions, and he helped design instruments that would let humanity listen and look farther than ever before. When NASA launched the Voyager probes, Carl championed sending a golden record along for the ride, a shiny message in a bottle containing greetings, music, and sounds from Earth, because he liked the idea that someone somewhere might one day pick up our little cosmic postcard and smile. He imagined extraterrestrials listening to Chuck Berry, whales, and Beethoven, tilting their heads like curious children and thinking, who are these noisy, wonderful creatures? Carl's greatest gift was the way he explained science as a form of poetry, weaving facts into stories that made people say, "Oh, now I see," as if the universe had just handed them a secret handshake. He wrote books filled with metaphors that glowed, phrases like "we are made of star stuff" that instantly gave people a new way to feel connected to everything around them. On television, with a voice as warm as a campfire and as steady as a lighthouse, he guided millions through the strange landscapes of space and time, showing nebulae that looked like cosmic paintings and galaxies that spun like whirling dancers. He invited viewers to travel with him across the history of the universe, from the first atoms to the rise of life, explaining that each step was part of a grand, unfolding story anyone could learn to read. Carl loved the pale blue dot idea, the notion that if you view Earth from far away, it looks tiny, fragile, and wonderfully precious. And he used that image to remind people to treat each other kindly because we share this one small home. He argued that science and humanism belong together, that understanding the cosmos should make us more compassionate, not less, because when we see how rare and delicate life is, we feel a stronger urge to protect it. He encouraged skepticism, never accepting claims without evidence, but paired that with boundless imagination, because asking "what if?" was just as important as asking "how do we know?" Carl loved the search for life beyond Earth, not just because it was exciting, but because finding other life would change our story, showing that life is not a lonely accident, but perhaps a common thread woven through the galaxy. He supported projects that listened for signals from other civilizations, and he thought carefully about what we might say if we ever spoke to strangers from the stars. He warned with playful seriousness that if aliens answered back, we should avoid sending them our worst ideas first, and might instead introduce them to our music, our mathematics, and perhaps a good joke. Carl also loved the small wonders of Earth, the patterns of a seashell, the slow, endless toil of coral reefs, the way a child asks a question with pure surprise, and he believed caring for these things was part of being wise about the universe. He worried about environmental damage, climate threats, and small-minded thinking, and he urged people to use science to protect the fragile biosphere that makes life possible. When he spoke to young people, he sounded like a kindly guide handing out compasses and flashlights, telling them to go explore with courage, but also with humility, to ask bold questions and to be ready for answers that change how we see ourselves. He loved to imagine future explorers visiting the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, peering through strange fogs and finding oceans under icy crusts, and he smiled at the thought of the first human footprints on another world. Carl believed that science was a community project. Discoveries do not belong to single people, but to the whole species that asks, double-checks, and builds upon each idea with teamwork and generosity. He wrote with clarity and warmth, making complicated ideas feel like friendly puzzles rather than intimidating tests, and invited readers to join the adventure even if they had never studied physics. His voice, in print and on screen, made people feel less alone under the vast sky and more full of possibility, because he always treated listeners like partners in discovery rather than passive spectators. He used humor, gently witty, kind, often self-deprecating, so that learning felt joyful instead of scary, and so audiences could laugh while their minds stretched to imagine galaxies and deep time. Carl's curiosity was combined with humility. He loved to admit how little we knew and how exciting it was that there was still so much to learn, like having a huge bookshelf of unread books and being thrilled rather than overwhelmed. He celebrated the scientific method, the patient, careful, sometimes tedious process of checking, testing, and repeating, because it was the best tool humans had ever made to pry open nature's secrets. He feared dogma and closed minds more than he feared failure, because closed minds stop the journey altogether, while mistakes are just steps toward better understanding. When people asked him whether science could answer the deepest questions about meaning and purpose, he would say science gives us tools to explore and reveal facts, and that we combine those facts with imagination, art, and compassion to build meaning together. He loved the idea that human beings could be both rational and dreaming creatures, using logic to build bridges and wonder to light the way across them. Carl's work inspired countless students to become astronomers, planetary scientists, and science communicators, people who now spend their days building telescopes, launching probes, and searching for habitable worlds with the same wonder he radiated. Even when critics argued or skeptics challenged popular claims, Carl remained a calm, persuasive voice for curiosity, education, and evidence-based thinking, always ready to explain patiently rather than shout. He took science seriously, but not solemnly. He treated the universe as an enormous playground of ideas where mistakes were part of learning and surprises were the best kind of prize. He believed that everyone, no matter their background, could learn to think like a scientist, asking clear questions, testing ideas, checking evidence, and changing their minds when the facts demanded it. Carl loved to imagine a future where people traveled beyond Earth not only for science, but to become better caretakers of life, bringing with them a sense of responsibility and cosmic citizenship. He spoke often about our shared future, urging cooperation across nations, disciplines, and cultures, because the challenges we face, climate, resources, planetary protection, require teamwork on a grand scale. He also loved the arts and saw poets, painters, and musicians as partners in the same human enterprise, making sense of existence, expressing wonder, and helping people feel connected to one another. Carl warned against fear-driven politics and short-sighted decisions, believing that the long view, thinking in terms of centuries, not just election cycles, was essential for our survival and flourishing. He was playful about technology too, both enchanted by its promise and careful about its misuse, reminding people that tools reflect the values of the hands that wield them. When explaining complex ideas like cosmic background radiation or planetary atmospheres, he drew pictures with words so clear you could almost see the diagrams, making dense science feel accessible and even cozy. He loved metaphors comparing the universe to a library, to a story, to a vast ocean because metaphors let people carry big ideas in their hearts in ways numbers alone rarely do. Carl's sense of scale was both humbling and exhilarating. He could make you feel wonderfully small and infinitely important at the same time, because small beings asking big questions is precisely what makes the universe meaningful. He argued that humility before the cosmos should breed curiosity, not despair, because knowing how small we are only increases the wonder at our capacity to observe, understand, and care. He delighted in cosmic coincidences, the strange alignments, the lucky combinations of chemistry and gravity that made life possible, and he invited people to celebrate those miracles while still asking how they happened. Carl's influence stretched from classrooms to space agencies, from late-night stargazers to policymakers, and his gentle insistence on evidence and wonder helped shape generations who think about Earth as a fragile home in a vast, shared neighborhood. He often ended talks with a mix of an invitation, asking listeners to keep asking questions, to take nothing for granted, and to carry curiosity forward like a lantern that lights other people's paths. When he spoke of time, he reminded us that we stand on a tiny ledge of the universe as history, but that our choices now echo forward. He hoped those echoes would be generous, thoughtful, and life-affirming. Carl Sagan remains a luminous guide for anyone who wants to learn how to look up with humility, curiosity, and joy, to treat knowledge as an adventure, and to remember that the cosmos is a vast shared story we all help write together. Whenever a child stares at the night sky and asks, "What's out there?" or a scientist tweaks an instrument to catch a whisper from deep space, Carl's spirit is there, smiling and saying, "Keep looking, there is so much more."